G'day friends and welcome to this week's episode of Coming Up Next, the podcast. Support the show by heading to comingupnext.com.au. You can find links to iTunes, Stitcher or Podbean where you can subscribe to the show. That means it's going to hit your pocket each and every week. It's also available on Spotify and on YouTube, so whichever platform you'd like to be listening to Coming Up Next on, it's there for you. Also, if you'd like to hear any of the archives, any of the previous 156 episodes, they're all available for you for free at each and every one of those links. Welcome, good listener, to episode 157 of Coming Up Next, the podcast. The 3-year celebrations roll on this week with Ivana Chubbuck. I'm Alistair Marks, this is my show, and if this is your first time tuning in, as you heard at the head, you can find all the archives at comingupnext.com.au. Philosophical rambles with some of the world's top actors, writers, directors, astronauts, architects, pretty much anyone who's creating a life of their own design. And speaking of creating a life of your own design, my guest this week, Ivana Chubbuck, has certainly taken that to the highest possible level. She started out as an actor herself and a writer, and decided pretty early on that actually what she was inspired by was teaching and nurturing other performers, other creatives to achieve the highest possible standard of work. She's since gone on to become the acting coach to some of Hollywood's biggest names, including Brad Pitt, Beyonce, Charlize Theron, amongst many, many others. A number of years ago, she wrote a book called The Power of the Actor, which has become almost essential reading material for anyone aspiring to a life in the arts, in any creative field, not just the world of acting. We talk about that. We talk about the usual philosophical stuff. So let's get right into it right now. Episode 157 of Coming Up Next with Ivana Chubbuck. How long have you been living in Los Angeles for?
Okay, so I've been living here since 1971, I believe, something like that.
Right. Mm-hmm. What area did you grow up in?
Michigan, Detroit.
In Detroit, okay.
Mm-hmm. Murder capital.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I could imagine.
I survived.
Right. You didn't get murdered.
I didn't get murdered, no.
Yeah.
I'm here to tell the tale.
Yeah. I could imagine that there would be quite a culture shock. I mean, I haven't actually been to Detroit, but
it's very middle class. It's very provincial.
Yep.
And so it's, it was a culture shock as the day is long. And I came out here and I with some friends that we were all going to move out here together. And within a couple of days, they hated it, decided to move to San Francisco, but we all bought the car together. So basically, I didn't have any place to stay, but I was bound and determined to be an actor, to be living in Los Angeles, and I was not going to fail. I mean, so many bad things happened. I got ripped off, my clothes, my money, all kinds of men were trying to do what they do, and they're awful people, to a young girl who's 21 years old. Not even 20, I was 20 years old. And so, but I was bound and determined that I was never going back. I was going to succeed in Los Angeles. I was going to be an actress, and I was going to, and also a writer, because I made a lot of money writing. I used to work at Universal Studios as a writer for Cheech and Chong.
Wow.
And I was part of the team that wrote their movies and stuff. So, and I also wrote for, I did script doctoring for a lot of movies. I also have written for a lot of TV Guide, the comedy pieces for TV Guide, and for lots of magazines. I did, writing, including short stories for literary magazines. So I was bringing in money to support my acting habit, but that's like the long version of the story. When I first came out here, there was so much damage that was done by so many people trying to hurt me, and I was not going to let that happen. I was going to survive, God damn it.
Yeah, and now here we sit in your the room where you coach some of the biggest names in Hollywood and in the history of entertainment and show business.
Yes.
And it must be really profound to kind of, I mean, you're showing me all of these amazing things that you have in this room that have kind of been gifted to you over the years from some of these amazing people. It must be pretty amazing to be able to reflect and to just kind of sit in that, or do you?
Well, I feel that because I'm a victim of abuse. I grew up with a mother who was mentally ill and a hoarder. You know that show Hoarders? Well, that's my life. I grew up with like rats and cockroaches and stuff, like waking up with roaches all over me and that kind of stuff. And also she was very physically and emotionally and verbally abusive, but was unaware because she would turn and all of a sudden violence would happen, and you wouldn't know when that was how a child's going to figure out how that's going to be triggered. Even I still to this day don't know what triggered her, but in any case, I was it was always about surviving. It's always about surviving because my father, who was a great man and an amazing brain, and he didn't want to be there. He stayed there the whole time, but he'd leave early in the morning. He was a lawyer, and he'd come back late at night. So he was never there to protect us. I have 6 other brothers and sisters.
Wow,
and she beat us up, not necessarily equally, but often. And we all had our turn being the unfavored child, and so it's never about sitting and reflecting. It's always about the future. So the past was always ugly in my head. So I don't even remember so much of the past. What I think about is the future and how I can keep growing and changing and evolving. So everything, if bad things happen, what do I need to learn from it? If, how do I need to grow from it? What is the life lesson here? And how can I use that to help my students, whether they're actors, writers, or directors, be able to explore their issues through my personal, journey, so that they can, within the environment of making a movie or doing a play, be able to grow and evolve and change as well. So bad things are meant to be objects and ways to grow from, fuel to grow from. And so you say about reflecting, I think I don't have time for that. That's past. Yeah. That's done. And if I think about the past, this is a little girl's point of view, all I can think about is a lot of damage and hurt, and I couldn't change anything, and I had no power over anything because I was a little kid at the disposal of someone who wasn't in their right mind, and a father who just wasn't there to do anything about it. So it's always about future. Set a bar, meet the bar, raise the bar. Meet the bar, raise the bar again. So to me, it's always about like a constant growth, constant change, exploration, the adventure of knowledge, because there's a great adventure in knowledge. And people are afraid to read books. It's like, I've had people say, like, I've never read a book in my life. And I said, I don't know why that's like something that you're proud of.
Like a mark of pride, yeah.
But it's like,
that's weird.
But the point is, I mean, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing because the podcasts are for those people who don't like to read. The people who not necessarily have the time to read because in their car they can listen. And it's less invasive in your.
It's a more passive
day-to-day
way of consuming information.
But it's also not. It's not even passive. It's like it's just something in a day-to-day when you have the very little time. You can actually listen. You can't read in a car and drive, but you could listen. So it's a more available way to learn from, and whatever podcast you choose to listen to. But to me, I in terms of time to reflect, is a waste of time.
Sure.
Okay. The only time that I really spend time reflecting, it's about taking, how did that bad thing, that traumatic thing, the dramatic thing, how was I responsible? How I was not responsible? How I can take my culpability in it, but also know that I wasn't only at fault. That is a whole nother sticky wicket about things, is that people taking too much responsibility and then beating themselves up and being self-destructive.
I've definitely done that before.
We all have.
Yeah.
And so I think about my culpability, but also how other people have affected that and their own neuroses and issues and childhood things that they've gone through. I've become the symbol to hurt, not because I did anything, but because I represent something. So there's all that afoot. So that's reflection. That takes time to think about how is that the case. And then, again, how do I use this information to grow with?
So you don't repeat the same patterns or the same habits, or you do, but you're doing it deliberately if you do.
Well, it's not about repeating; it's about learning from it.
Right.
Because I don't really think about repetition. I think about.
Well, I don't mean that you're necessarily repeating it, but if you're constantly finding yourself, and I guess I'm talking on a psychological level, not an artistic level.
No, but I'm talking both. I'm talking about putting the two pieces together.
I suppose that's the kind of.
Because I'm talking about like not being a better, more healthy individual, because the arts, the more fucked up you are, the more you're
more
actually,
juice you got.
Well, the more juice you got, the more riches you have, the more density of spirit you have to bring to the party, the more insecure and the fears that you understand and the dramas that you've lived through, how to use that to actually fuel your journey to overcome and win as the character, and therefore as yourself, because you personalize, and therefore as for the audience to grow with and understand that if that character can use the worst of circumstances and the worst of issues to actually explore overcoming and winning with, then maybe so could they. So it gives them hope. So to me, it's like I'm bonding the two pieces together of how I even created this technique, the Chubbuck technique in the first place, which was about survival. It's like I could take the same information and self-destruct with, or I could take the same information and use that as actual fuel. It's a very powerful fuel to be able to take, bad things, or people would consider bad things, and see them as gold. And that's what an artist does. An artist, that's their colors. There's an infinite amount of colors, and really understanding the science of behavior.
And I think that, like you say, I think it's about having those layers of self-awareness so that you know what the tools that you have at your disposal are, so that you know yourself as a human being better than anyone else, so that when you come to having a script or a piece of art or a film,
it's always every time I work on anything, I do workshops all over the world. Each person, even though they're doing the same material I've done a bunch of times before, I'm learning. I always have revelations. So revelations about myself, revelations of this is why I did what I did, or this is why this person that I love very much it went out to hurt me. They weren't trying to hurt me. They were acting out, and whatever. The thing is, it's like the idea is, it's a constant growth process. So that when I've had people ask me, say, would I be not as good an actor if I go to therapy? And I said, no, therapy is great because it helps you define what it is that is your issues, where they came from. So the more you understand that, the more detail you can bring to your roles, or to your writing, or to your directing. I just was talking to a very important director. I'm not going to say who it is because I like to keep that therapeutic relationship, but to say he's very famous, and what he was talking about was what we were talking about together, which was why he needs to direct the script that he also wrote. What is it that you need to solve by writing and directing this particular script? And so through this thing that I do call the emotional diary, which is a tool that gets right to your subconscious.
It's like a stream of consciousness, right?
Kinda. So that's a longer conversation, and one you need visuals for. So, but it's in the book. It's described in my book.
In the Power of the Actor.
In the Power of the Actor. So there's actually how to do it and what it means. But it's literally something that takes 3 to 5 minutes to do and gets directly into information in your subconscious that your conscious mind would never have allowed you to have. And that's where your riches are, because that's the truth of how you really feel, because your conscious mind is there to protect you from hurting all the time and being in severe pain. So it changes the truth of it, and negates it, it forgets it. It changes how you feelings about it, thinking that you're over something when you're really not, or when you think you're not over something and you really are. I mean, like the truths of what really goes on. And so I made him do that exercise, and he was like the enlightenment of like, wow. As I knew it was he knew it was his soul project. This is his special project. But he didn't realize why it was, and that's gonna. And then we talked about how that's gonna find its way in his directing the performances of the actors. That he is going to put what he needs to push the trigger in them, their personal things that help him be able to solve his issues. And so it becomes, we're all doing this as an ensemble reality, and ultimately the audience gets involved when they see it. So it's I call it empowerment through the arts. It's like what we want to do is like solve things in the arts, not sit in our shit. And too many actors think good acting is crying or emoting and feeling their pain. And I always say, like, in the same way that when you're around somebody that is always in truth are feeling their pain, and they're talking about how they're a victim and how this bad thing is happening to them, and they're always truthfully and honestly in pain all the time. It's like those are people we want to stay away from. These are people that are annoying to us, even people that we love so much in our lives. We just don't like being around them, because when these are people that we don't like to be around for free. We're certainly not going to pay money to see them, or to hire them, because to be around that. So we want to see people who take the small amount. The dynamic people of the world are the ones that take same information, but instead of self-destructing, what they do is they construct with it. There's a book called Think and Grow Rich. Basically, it's a thin book, but basically the main thing, and you don't have to get the book because it's honestly, this is the concept of it. And this is what I espouse, is like, he said, basically 95% of the population of the world take bad things that happen to them. Naysayers, the people that say you can't do it, you're not pretty enough, smart enough, you don't have social hierarchy enough, educated enough, whatever the thing is, and they take that as their reasons to be defeated, and then don't go after anything. They just they not only sit in their shit, they just make safe choices because they don't want to deal with the idea of the possibility that all these people are right. 5% of the world's population are people who take that same information when they get the naysayers and the traumas and the insecurities and the fears and the things that generally happen to everybody, that they take that information. They say, not only am I going to win in spite of you, but because of you. So I'm going to use that. It's like, oh yeah, well, screw you. See, watch me fly, watch me soar. Yeah. And so what happens is that's 5%. Those are the leaders of the world. Anybody who accomplishes great things always are those people. See, everybody always has impasses. Everybody has hurdles. There's no such thing as a life without them. Whether it's your social life or a career life, there's always going to be hurdles, and there's always going to be obstacles, and sometimes they're really, really huge and dramatic, and sometimes they're little and petty, but there are lots of them on different levels. But it's how you deal with that information that makes a difference between dynamic people and people that are just your day-to-day. I call them the norms. The people that just do normal, they're the normal people, but we don't aspire to be normal. Yeah. We aspire to be great, spectacular, extraordinary, which those words are extraordinary. And so the thing is that it's like, that's what I always say to my actors, my writers, directors. I say, it's like, what you just did was good, but I don't think good's good enough. I want the best. I want extraordinary. And so I'm going to help you take chances and cross the boundaries that you've created for yourself and other people have created for you, and say, let's push the envelope. Let's make bold choices. The worst that can happen is that people will say you suck. That's the worst that can happen. You're not going to die,
Yeah.
you know. But you've taken the chance. It could also be give you awards, give you a great career, give you great respect, and be in a position that people really are looking at you as someone that, God, I wish I could be that person. And how wonderful that is to be a role model to humanity.
Yeah. I could imagine when you're putting the power of the actor together, and as you're kind of starting to go on your own sort of journey of self-awareness and self-discovery to kind of find and create these tools for actors and people that you were working with, that could have been a very vulnerable position that you put yourself in, because you're having to use yourself almost as the guinea pig for all of this new sort of stuff.
Well, I don't see it as a guinea pig, because I love talking about my stuff, because I say, like, I had this and this is what I did with it.
Yeah.
So I take pride in what other people take as a point of shame or a point of something they don't want to hide. I take it as, like, people always tell me how courageous I am to tell the things I say all over the world to virtual strangers that are in my classes and stuff. That become people that become very close to me, because I open up. That gives them permission to open up. I tell them, it's like, this is how I got to where I am, is by looking at this stuff as my is the hurdles. Like, the higher the hurdle is, and you jump over that hurdle, that's an accomplishment. So the thing is, that hurdle, that drama or the insecurities are the things that I tell everybody about, the things that I've been involved with, like, you know, the drugs I was involved with, and the promiscuity, and, you know, that kind of stuff back in the day. It was like, really, I got to the point it was so self-destructive that I a couple of times almost died, you know. And
is this before or after you moved to LA, or both?
Both. It's on a track, you know.
Yeah.
But that's what I knew I had. That's what the whole system came in, was like, I can't keep doing this to myself. I got to find a way to change the way I see the same information. So life is all about a choice of two paths. One path is the path of least resistance, which is the path of just giving up. It's so easy to give up. And so just like, that's a path of least resistance, the give up path. But there's no accomplishment in that. There's no satisfaction in that. There's no sense of pride in that. Then there's the path of most resistance, where you have, like, it's raining and, you know, and there's sleet and there's spiders and snakes and brambles hitting you in the face as you're walking through this path. But if you get through it, there's such satisfaction. It's like, no matter what gets presented to you, it's like, God damn it, I'm bound and determined to, like, make that be something that gives me a purpose to overcome and win with. And I use the word win a lot, because there's a human equation of, like, win-lose, that we find ourselves in adrenaline happens in us when we need to win. So I put the win-lose aspect in the acting, which makes it really quite different than other people's techniques, because I want people to want to win their objective, so that not only are they creating an adrenaline in themselves, but an audience becomes a sporting, you know, section where they're watching and they're picking sides, and they're going, you know, they're supporting, like, their favorite player, and the moves that the player is making in the same way. So it becomes an exciting thing to watch. Performance or directing or the writing of it, whatever aspect of it is, it's like to watch people with the primal need to win, which does literally create adrenaline, which is organic speed. And most people will agree that speed feels good. Now, it's bad for you when you take it, and other than organic places like cocaine or crystal meth and that kind of stuff. But people love it when they're taking that stuff. But it's so destructive because it really messes with your biology. Whereas a natural adrenaline is actually very healthy. Keeps your heart pumping. It's good for your psyche. It's good for your body, and it creates an excitement of life, a joie de vivre, you know. And so, what we're doing is creating that reality that allows your audience and you, because remember the actor or the director who's directing something, even when they're writing, the person who's writing, it's like if you have that win-lose kind of aspect to it, makes things go faster and creates that excitement.
It certainly can give it that kind of life and death sort of feel, like,
Well, life or depression.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm thinking two different things, but the thing is, like, I got full of life or I'm kind of depressed.
Yeah.
And just feeling your feelings, which is really nice. Some actors think that if they can cry on cue, that makes them a good actor, but that's just not the case. And if you look at the people that are famous and people who win the awards, it's rare when we see them crying. It's usually when they're really trying to win something. So really, at the end, I will win no matter what. The means justify the end. I'm going for it, whatever the emotional or physical or both need is of that particular movie or play or TV show. It's like watching that journey is it creates like our as an audience makes us want to do more, as opposed to sit at home and just be depressed.
Yeah. I'd love to step back for just a second into, talking about Detroit again, and what your childhood was like in a kind of creative sense. I know you said that your mum was quite abusive, but your dad was an attorney, wasn't he?
Yeah, and a scholar, and he also taught graduate law at university, and he was an amazing man who did a lot of free cases for civil rights and for poor people. And it's just that he was there for everybody else. He just wasn't there for us.
Right.
And so it was like a little kid who just didn't have, like, God, he's such a good man and everybody loves him so much, and he gives away free time. And this way, our family never had any money because he was giving away so much of his free time. Is that you feel like, God, if we're not important enough to take care of, and you are capable of taking care of people in a very profound way, then maybe we're not worth it. So it becomes, I say we, I have a retarded brother who was, at my father's funeral, my mother beat him up, so and he's now going through a lot of severe mental issues off of the severity of her abuse. And I feel there's a lot of guilt I have about the fact that because I was in my own protection mode, that I wasn't there to take care of him and protect him from such a horrible abuse. And also because we were the only Jews in an all Catholic neighborhood, I didn't have any friends. And I didn't think I was worth being friends with because of my home environment. So I never kind of tried to create, like, you could like me anyway, because if you started off not liking me because of my religion, then maybe... And then because I didn't have the confidence from home, I just let that be, and I was all alone. So what I would do was write stories. I couldn't talk to people. I literally had to do a countdown to actually say hello. I'd go 10, 9, 8, 7. I'd actually do a countdown to be able to say hello to anybody, because I was so terrified that they would just think, "Oh, you're so stupid." Because I grew up with my mother saying, "You're ugly and stupid, ugly and stupid, you're ugly and stupid." So anyway. And a bunch of other stuff. But so even saying hello is to me the possibility of being, reviled and put down. And so what I'd write is funny stories. And then I'd hand them out to people. And people say, "Oh, you're really funny," And so that's what I would do, is I couldn't talk, but I could write. I would also do paintings, mostly with charcoal, because I thought everything was shades of gray because of my childhood. So apparently in my elementary school, they saw some of my do paintings there, and I had charcoals and stuff like that at home, and that's what I would do, because I didn't have any friends, and I do a lot of artwork and writing. So one of the teachers, I think in first grade, I was like 6 or 7, something like that, saw something that I had drawn, and she sent it to the Detroit Institute of Arts, and there was a class for genius prodigies, and they put me in from that. But I thought I sucked. I thought my story sucked. I thought my artwork sucked. I just thought everything that I did was awful. And so when they said that, it was like, why am I here? And I'd see everybody else's thing and say, oh, that's so much better than mine. Mine's stupid. Mine's awful. So, but I guess it's a turnaround later on. Again, this is like the process of self, deprecation in such an extreme amounts because of circumstances. That is another reason why I came up with the stuff I had to come up with and why I was so self-destructive. But I'm trying to think what else in Detroit. We didn't move into an all-Jewish neighborhood until I was 15. And so I had all the childhood stuff of people like saying, you're going to go to hell, you killed Christ. And I remember saying to these kids saying, I don't even know who Christ is. How could I kill him? If I don't know him, how could I have killed him? So it's like the best I had, because I was being so tortured for religion, so tortured at home. We were the crazy family in the neighborhood. The health department was called on our house so many times.
Was your household were you guys religious? Did you do Shabbos or the high holidays or anything, or was it not really? This is an interesting story. It's like there's always reasons why people can be very evil. My mother her father was a rabbi, and they were very Orthodox, and the Jewish religion and the high the Hasidic religion part of it, and some high Orthodox too. It's like women are the temptresses, and that's why you have to wear the wig when you get married so you don't tempt. And wear all black and cover yourself, much like the Muslim religion, it's the same kind of concept. And so she was raped by my grandfather's brother, her uncle, at 13 years old. And then when she told her, my grandparents, her parents, that this happened, they beat her up. They said, what did you do to tempt him to make him do this? And don't ever speak of this again. You're a shame to the family. So, of course, she's living with this, and her first sexual experience is one that's a moment of shame. Jewish religion is creating this, and she decided that if God would accept and sanction little girls to be raped, and supporting that reality, that I don't want any part of it. And she became an atheist. She said, I don't believe in God at all that can let that happen. But she still took on the guilt and the shame. So that became why she became mentally ill. And the hoarding is about protection. Right. Hoarding is always about protection. And so and the attack is attack before you get attacked. So there's imagined attack at you. And so it makes sense that she became, because there's always, when you play a character who's really abusive and evil, there's always righteous reasons for their evil behavior, and you have to investigate that, because there's always good reasons that they're trying to solve something that and overcome something that happened to them as children. Evil adults, when I say evil in quotes, because evil is not evil to them. They are solving something. They're trying to fix something. That's the only way that they can. And my father was very religious. So it was a very interesting thing, because during the holidays, the high holidays, he'd go to a synagogue, but was never asked us to do anything. So we had maybe a very short stint when we went to Sunday school, learned a little Hebrew, but I mean, literally, we weren't there long enough to do it. And since my mother doesn't drive and my father was always working all the time, there was nobody to take us and do any of this stuff. So he decided he was going to. He's in an Orthodox cemetery, which my mother does not want to be buried, and she's still alive, and like a cockroach, she's going to, outlive us all. I'm telling you, my mother, it's like, she has highest cholesterol. She's had every disease under the sun. She's fucking 97 years old. Wow. And it's like, and she just keeps on ticking like a Timex, Yeah. And, but anyway, So what was the path that led you to acting? Do you remember the first time that you kind of got on stage or got in front of people and had that experience? Well, I just knew that there was because I couldn't talk to people, and I couldn't communicate with people, and I didn't have friends, and that was a way to
express myself. I didn't have any other way to be on a stage and to express my feelings through somebody else's words. So I didn't have to even make up my own words. And so I got into a theater group when I was like 12, 13 years old. I'd ride my bike too. I just remember one of the first performances that this group did. This is like Michigan. It's like not a big deal. It's like, it makes community theater look like it's, stellar. So our first gig was at a mental institution. And so it was all these crazy people. That was our audience. And so they said, whatever you do, the people who ran the institution said, whatever you do not look at the audience. And of course, you can't tell someone, especially someone who's 13 years old. It's like, don't look at the audience. So it's like, that's what you got to, whatever someone tells you not to do, that's what you got to do. And so we're performing, we're in, and it's like 20 minutes into the play, and I had to look, and there were the strangest, weirdest people I've ever seen, and I froze. Couldn't remember anything for a good maybe 3 minutes of just staring at what. So, it was like, really, whatever you think and imagine, like the craziest people on the planet to look like, that's what it looked like. And especially in my head, and when you're a little kid, everything is like that much more. You don't have the ability to go through what's politically correct, what's not politically correct. You just see things in a very pure way. And rationalizations, thinking about their stuff, and it's a little kid stuff is pure taken. And so I was like, never seen anything like that before other than my mother. And that was my first experience on the stage.
Right. Wow. So,
and I auditioned for all the school things. I never booked one.
Right. Not
one. But I was always like, I painted flats, and I was a part of the team, but I put my number in, sign up for it, and when it was time for me to like actually get up there and audition, I would, for the most part, run away. But right before they called my number.
Right.
Yeah.
Were your parents aware of these kind of creative pursuits that you were having, or they just didn't really take much notice? 7
brothers and sisters. I remember leaving the house. I just left the house. I was 15 and a half, 16. And I just left for 2 weeks. And I was like just getting up to no good. I mean, I was doing a lot of drugs and hanging out with a bunch of people, and they were doing the same. And it was the 60s, for God's sakes. That's what you did. And a lot of acid.
I was going to say, it must have been a lot of acid.
A lot of acid and mescaline and peyote and.
It was around the time of Richard Alpert and Timothy Leary.
Yeah, Timothy Leary, Ken Kesey, those people. And I was also part of a political group like SDS, kind of thing. Our group was called Yip Fugs, and we were part of the Chicago, riots thing. And I was the youngest member of the group. They're all college age, but they thought I was really smart, so they made me part of the upper echelon of this political group. So we would do all kinds of things that were like very revolutionary, but I was always like, why did they invite me to this? It's like, I don't know how to do this. I'm a really little girl.
Had that fraudulent kind of complex? Huh? Had that kind of fraud complex where you felt like, what have I done or am I in the right place? Or,
Well, like how did I hoodwink them?
Yeah,
Because, but they also gave me the purposes of education. So I had to teach people about the Vietnam War and the history of it, and the history of racism in our country, of which I did. And I also used to write for, remember the movie Almost Famous? Cream magazine.
Yeah.
I was one of those people.
Wow.
I was one of the kids.
Yeah.
Because they didn't pay, so they get to us to do it. I wrote for a newspaper called The Fifth Estate, which is part of the MC5 kind of stuff. If you know anything about the music world, and back in the '60s, MC5 was pretty like big, but all Detroit. It's a Motor City 5.
Right.
And so I was always going to all the concerts and stuff, and then I was the photographer for Cream magazine, and I'd go with another girl who's my age. We were both 16, 17, and we'd go, we'd interview people like Alice Cooper and stuff like that. Alice Cooper lived.
That must have been amazing.
Well, it was pretty amazing because we were like with backstage passes to everything.
Yeah.
And we interviewed the most interesting people. I almost got raped by one of the people. But it's like
not so amazing.
Well, yeah, I could hold my own.
Right,
You know, I ended up being, I think I terrified him. I told him I was going to bite him. And he didn't believe me, and I did. So,
Right.
So I was like, "Don't fuck with the Chubbuck, okay?" And but the issue is that I kind of made the left turn into. All of a sudden, I had friends that were the politicos, the revolutionaries, and we were going to change the world, and we were going to, and we were always having meetings, and there's always parties after the meetings, and there's a lot of fun in these, and hanging out with a bunch of politicos, that were all like college, they're all college people, because I don't know if you look at the history books, but the 60s were filled with that kind of stuff, and there's always rock concerts, and we would go, and it's those 3-day work that they had all over in Detroit, because we had a big music community in Ohio. We would drive over there with the 3-day rock concerts, so you would just get blasted and have fun with you. So all of a sudden I had friends. All of a sudden I had a way to like communicate, because it was going to be about politics and changing the world and making it a better place to live in, and so it just kind of goes hand in hand. And I use what I do for a living now to empower the world, the humanity, through the arts. So they don't know I'm not hitting them over the head. I'm not proselytizing. You don't have to go to a church. All you have to do is watch TV, go to the theater, and you'll get the message subliminally that you have the power to follow your dreams and to accomplish whatever you want. But subliminally, in an entertaining way, which is the best way. But it began with being a part of and my father was also someone who was a Holocaust survivor, and so he wanted it. That's why he always gave free cases. That's why he was always doing what he was doing to give back, because he left Germany when he was 11.
Right.
And
probably without his family, I would imagine.
Family came, first to from Germany, from Heidelberg to Netherlands, and Netherlands was taken over by the Nazis. So then they came here, and they had all the money in the world, and then they had nothing. And they had a store in New York City, the usual, Jewish people coming here. from
the usual shtick.
From the usual shtick from, the Holocaust, stuff. And so he was bound and determined to change the world in his way. So I was feeling like the first time I was arrested for doing a sit-down strike during a time we had the big riots in Detroit, and there was a curfew, and so anybody was out after curfew, which we did on purpose. I remember I was part of this political group. So they can't put you in regular jail if you're 18 or over, but they can when you're younger. And I was like, I was 16 or 17. And so my father was such a radical politico that when he came to pick me up at the jail, he was so proud. He was like, "That's my girl."
That's brilliant.
Isn't that brilliant? And so that carried on. So I'm always asking my father, because he's passed away for 25 years now. I talk to him in heaven or up in the sky, whatever. I always seem to go up. And I say, "You're proud of me? You're proud of me? You're proud of me?" And because he was a good man. He just wasn't there to protect us. That's the part I struggle with. But that became the beginning of my exploring. I actually had the whole school strike the whole school, because they wouldn't let girls wear pants. They would only let them wear skirts or dresses, and they had to be at a certain length. And I had the whole school strike. And I remember I was the shyest person ever. I could not talk to people. I had to write stories. Remember that part of the story? And at one point, I just because of all the stuff that was happening, I said, "You know what? You may hate me, you may love me, but I'm not going to be not seen anymore, because I don't want to be that invisible person that I was being for my whole life." So at 15 years old, when I got into this political group, 15, 16 is when I just started becoming this, blossomed out, because I said, I'm going to do the craziest stuff. I'm going to say the most shocking things. I am going to just like go just do whatever. You'll either love me or you're going to hate me, but you're not going to have an in-between viewpoint of me. And that's been my point of view ever since. And it's been working really well because my lack of fear in doing that has made people actually find, because courage is very sexy. And I found this all of a sudden became really popular. So my family used to make a joke about it. So the phone would never ring on my behalf. And all of a sudden they had to put a thing on the wall of all the phone calls that were coming in for me, you know. And the prom, I had all these people ask me to the prom, but since I didn't believe I was a revolutionary, the proms are counter-revolutionary, so we struck the prom.
Yeah.
I went, but I was on the outside striking it.
Yeah. So I guess getting into this political group and being someone who was kind of given the responsibility of educating people, was that
also rabble rousing? I was a part of the striking and creating strikes and ideas to how we can do this, like the merry pranksters. We were a bunch of merry pranksters. A lot of people, a lot of us were really meant to. Like I ended up coming out here doing stand-up comedy. So the thing is that there were a lot of funny people in this group too. So we did a lot of silly things as well.
Yeah.
So it's just making it sound a little more erudite than it was.
Well, I guess
we had our moments of education, but for the most part, we were in party mode.
I guess I was trying to create a segue into being curious
segue,
about.
What?
That's right.
Actually, stop me from talking.
Occasionally, I do a segue.
Segues.
Was this your first experience of educating people and kind of having the kind of floor to shape the way that people may think or the way they perceive things?
Here's the thing, that because I come from 7 brothers and sisters, my mother was incapable, just not capable of doing it. She wasn't lucid. My older sister, who's 4 years older than me, I don't know, for whatever reason, she did not take that on, and I chose to take that on. So I was always taking care of and caretaking. So that's part of like being an educator, is being a caretaker too. So I was making sure that I would cook. I would take care of. I'd make sure, because like the babies were never, diapered, and they were pooping and peeing on everything, and so there was a lot of like, I had to step up because my older sister didn't, and there were a lot of kids to take care of, and so I think that began there, because I'm into care. It's inherently and fundamentally a caretaker. So it's like, you first, then I'll think about me. Because I think a good educator has to be selfless, and a lot of, especially acting teachers, what they'll do is abuse. You've been in an acting class before. I don't know. Have you ever had an abusive acting teacher? Most people have had someone who's taken advantage of people being open and vulnerable to them. And either taking advantage of them by really messing with their head and their confidence, or going as far as sexual seduction. There's been so many cases where sexual harassment. Well,
just look at the whole Me Too movement and all the stuff that's come out with
that. A lot of acting teachers were doing it, and a lot of them are dead now. But they're the stories I remember, and I've heard since then. And the stories I've heard from people that are past now are like, they're horrible. And I couldn't even imagine. It's like, how someone could think that way. Because I just, again, my mother being so abusive, when it came to other people, because of my retarded brother, what she would do, the only thing she did outside of, she didn't ever work. She didn't know how to drive a car or even write a check. But what she would do is create events for retarded adults. And first retarded children for my brother, and then when he became an adult, and she calls it her corporation, Love Incorporated. Right. And she gets on the phone and gives advice to retarded people. Don't ask. Okay, that's a comedy show in itself.
Yeah, right. I could imagine.
It's like someone who needs to like understand the world herself, but it's like she's a giving person. And so there was always that kind of sense of my father was taking care of people, selflessly. My mother, when she had her moments, it was always, if she had a lucid moment, that's where it would go, to helping people. Like maybe that's what kept my parents together. I don't know. And And so it's part of my growing up. So I couldn't even think in that way. It's like your growth is my growth, but you have to, it's like I had someone interviewing me yesterday for French TV, and it was like they said, when someone wins an Oscar, and says your name, or how do you feel? And I said, I don't really care about Oscars. I don't really care about the awards. What I care about is the work and the pride of work. So when I see the work that they've done that may be getting, lauded, I'm proud like a mama.
Because that's the real triumph.
Yeah, it's my real triumph is the work.
Yeah.
The quality of work, not the awards. I don't watch the Oscars. That's the truth of it. So I don't. I call it Oscar movie night, because what I do is I go to, because it's Hollywood, everybody's like doing something, Oscar party, going to the Oscars, whatever. Yeah. I go to any movie theater of a movie that I need to see that always is really crowded. Nobody's in there. So I have my own screening room with a huge movie theater.
Brilliant.
And I sit there and stretch out, have my popcorn, have a big screening room right there in front of me. That's called Oscar Movie Night, and I've been doing that for years.
That's great. What a great idea. So you pack your life into a car with a few other people, headed for Hollywood. Not via San Fran was after Hollywood.
Yeah, I come from Detroit to...
You tucked and rolled out of the car while they kept going on to San Francisco.
Pretty much. It's almost a tuck and roll. Because I didn't even know, it wasn't very long. They figured out they hated L.A.
Yeah.
And they didn't say, they're all back in Michigan. So it's like,
right.
They lasted out in San Francisco a couple of weeks. But
yeah.
Also with these same people, I hitchhiked across the country with them the year before. And we were trying to find the Summer of Love, because the Haight-Ashbury thing, but that was long gone. But in our young heads, we were going like, oh, we can go to San Francisco. And that was what we were hitchhiking.
With flowers in your hair.
With flowers in our hair. But we went to Haight-Ashbury a couple of years. It was 1970. The Summer of Love was 1967. We went to hitchhike in 1970. And what we found there was a whole bunch of junkies.
Right.
Really heavy-duty junkies, crackheads, and the whole thing. It was a dark place. There was no people, with flowers in your hair. It's like none of
Donovan
that.
didn't serenade you on your way.
There was a lot of bullets flying,
right.
Stuff like. It wasn't anything like those wonderful people, hippieing around, calling themselves hippies because they were hipping around like that.
It was the hip thing to do.
Well, it would have been great in 1967, but
yeah.
we were just 14 at the time, so it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
But
so what was the? I mean, I know we're looking to condense a lot of time into a soundbite, I suppose, but the process of arriving in LA, working as an actor, working as a writer, and then actually going, no, this isn't what I actually want to do. What I want to do is. These actors are coming to me for advice.
I worked at a supermarket
notes.
for a long time during all this, by the way, just so
right.
you know. And I worked a lot of shitty jobs, so it didn't just come to me. But let's condense that to the thought process of why I decided to be a teacher, not a writer or actor. Well, I found that when I was acting, because writing was supporting the acting, so let's just talk about the acting as the passion. I found that when I was on set, I would look at my watch all the time and think time was going by really slow. But when I was teaching, and initially it started off just helping my friends who were actors too, and then started charging a little bit, and then created a little group that was a school and stuff. But I found that whenever I was teaching, whether it was privately or in a class environment, the time went by so fast.
When did you? Sorry to cut you off, but. When did you actually first start teaching? Like, when was...
I started teaching and, officially, where I had a school and stuff in 1980.
And even unofficially, like when people
unofficially
started...
before was, I would say, 5 years before.
And was that just, workshopping stuff and helping friends out?
Helping friends out, and people would come to the house and, charge very little money, and they'd work on that. And sometimes we'd have groups where I'd work with them on scenes and stuff like that, but it was really
right.
But I also worked at a shitty school that was in the valley, but it was it really was kind of a non-event, but it was just basically
very lo-fi.
Yeah, and but again, I found that time went by super fast. So like a 2-hour session with an actor as a teacher seemed to go by like in 3 minutes, whereas 2 hours on a set seemed like 100 hours. And so you always know. Here's the thing about a passion. If you figure out what you really like to do, what's the true passion, not what's in your head, the thing that really stands out is how time finds its way. If time goes by fast, that's the thing you should be doing. If time goes by really slow, that's the thing that you shouldn't be doing, or at least spending less time doing, and finding the thing that makes your time go by faster. Time is an interesting thing. Time doesn't change, but it does change in our perception. And our perception determines our love and the thing that we want to spend our life doing, and wanting to spend 16. I work every day, 16 hours a day. Before you came, I've been working all day with people all over the world on the phone, some people who came here. And I love doing what I do. So it's like, again, time goes by really fast. And when I'm not working, it goes so slow. And people said, you miss acting. I said, no, not at all. I love script doctoring, not actually writing the scripts myself. I love working with directors. So I like being the force behind people. It really motivates me, inspires me, and again, makes time go really fast. And so I think that's to me, if anybody wants to learn what it is, because I think one of the biggest problems about most people, they just don't know what they want to do. So a friend of mine, what he did was, he used to be a jazz musician, but he was finding he wasn't really finding that it was all that interesting to him. So he went back to school, and this is when he was about 30 years old when he did. Went back to school, and he took a bunch of different classes. One in high math, one on and literature, one in science, one in just think about all the different classes that, psychology, whatever. And he found that he really liked his high math classes. So he started looking at physics, and he really loved physics. And that was his third semester. He started narrowing it down to math, science, a specific kind of science. And now he decided, after that, just going back to school and just taking all kinds of things to determine what was the thing that he wasn't really inspiring him. And he was doing very well. He was playing with Dizzy Gillespie. He was doing well as a jazz musician. Yeah. He went to Berklee School of Music, which is really hard to do. So he was super talented, but he wasn't loving it. So now he's a very important, world-renowned nuclear physicist.
Wow.
One of my dearest friends. He was my first guy I ever dated in high school. He's my only friend that I've maintained a friendship with, and he's really funny. And he keeps his music in his head by doing bar mitzvahs on the weekend. Weddings and bar mitzvahs.
You can play the crap out of Havana Gilla.
And he would make that joke too. Yeah. And he probably can. Yeah. But he's an important friend to mine, because we're both people of the same nature. It's like on the table you go, well, you're a jazz musician and you're doing really well. Why would you just stay with that? Because that on the paper looks like that's a glamorous job. I was doing well. I was booking jobs. I did a lot of television, and I was on Laverne and Shirley and Three's Company and things like that. I just wasn't vibing on it, and I was vibing on teaching it. And so and he found his way. And again, I'm going to, for me, it was about time and the watch factor. How many times I wanted to look at my watch and how many times I didn't want to look at my watch was the difference.
Did you have a foundation of technique that you'd studied, or psychology that you'd studied, or were you more instinctive?
I studied behavioral science and anthropology, cultural anthropology in school. So I found if you really want to duplicate human behavior, you have to go to the resource, the science of behavior, and the the history of culture, and because you find there's certain things that define human beings, no matter what culture they come from or what era or period of time they come from. So I found some constants. There were certain constants that existed with whether you come from China or where you come from 1,000 years ago, South America, it's like there are constants that were the human equation that allows me to take any period, whether it's science fiction, in the future, in the past, whatever, it's surreal, or there's always a human, bottom line that I learned from the studying anthropology, and behavioral science is the science of behavior. So we know more about what people are feeling or going through from behavior. We see before we hear. And so when we're watching actors perform, if they just are making it all about the words, we only get a third of what's going on. We have to find the behavior, but we have to find it authentically, organically. And that was where the behavioral science classes really were helpful to me. So that's the basis of what I do. So so I did take a bunch of acting classes, but I did the animal thing, the trust exercises, the
people can't see your air quotes,
bubbles, the repetition, and I did all that stuff, and I just found that I'm going like, what does this have to do with this real human character on the page? That I love the exploring why people do the things that they do. It's so fascinating, and there's a stand-up comic who once said to me, "I love working with you," because I work with a lot of like comedy people. Like Gary Shanley was a guy that I worked with.
Oh wow, what was he like to work with?
Well, he was wonderful. He's also my friend too. So we both were doing stand-up at the same time, and I stopped doing stand-up because I wasn't that funny. I was missing a very key ingredient, being funny. So he, however, was. But I worked with him on the Larry Sanders Show almost every episode and that kind of stuff. But like, it was like one of our compatriots once said, I like working with you because you work scientifically, because it makes sense. It's the human equation. He said, I don't want to be a llama with a yeast infection. He said, so you won't be a llama with a yeast infection with me. I guarantee it. But it's like you're not an animal. You're not. It's like I don't understand any of that stuff, So
it's very esoteric, I guess.
Well, it's you can't go from mind things, or you can't go from things that you just wouldn't understand organically, because we are a more intelligent animal. We're an animal, but we're a different kind of animal, and there's certain things that we have as human beings that animals don't possess. So it's like we have to operate from, if we want to find all the colors and the densities and the layers of whether from a point of view of writing, directing, or acting, you have to understand the science of being a human being.
Absolutely. I'm just on the notion of time, worried about, or not worried, but concerned. We're just over an hour now. Are you happy to?
Let's wrap it up.
Want to wrap it up?
Let's wrap it up a beautiful bow. A verbal blow, because here's the problem: nobody can see us.
No one can see us.
Nobody can see us. We could do anything. We could be naked right now.
Well, that's what I was going to say earlier. When
We're not, but okay, just so anybody knows, in case you're fantasizing.
That'd be a weird fantasy.
It would be a weird fantasy.
Well, for someone listening, well, maybe not.
Somebody listening, no, but I how the thing goes that people say, if you want to not be afraid, you have to imagine your audience naked.
Yep.
I think that would be more terrifying to watch an audience being naked. It's like, ooh, that's
people
the
are listening
thing that's
to this
happening
naked
down there. It's like, hey, have a doctor look at that.
Well, when we used to record with my brother in the early days, there used to be a running gag that he refused, as the producer of the show, to wear pants. So these people would be coming into his bedroom to record this podcast with me, and he'd just be sitting there by his computer in his underwear.
Did you ever tell people that he was there without his pants, or you just let that be your personal secret?
He actually was wearing pants. Cat's out of the bag now.
That's what he said to everybody.
But he would say, on air, we would say that he wasn't wearing pants. So I'd have a lot of people coming up to me, and this is 3 years ago now, so I guess I don't mind letting it out, but I'd have a lot of people coming up to me saying, does he really not wear pants while he's producing the show?
That's the mystery of it all. So we could be here naked.
Yeah.
We might be.
Maybe we are. It'll make it very uncomfortable getting off this leather seat.
No, that would be sticking to it. It's like, I do want to leave, but the problem is that this chair wants to keep me here.
Yeah, I'm just going to have to take this cushion with me. So
it costs. On so many levels.
Yeah, I bet. So this cushion has had a lot of very successful butts sit on it.
Oh yeah, some very famous butts have been sat in that chair.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess to kind of start to wrap things up,
Mm-hmm.
when you start getting known as the person who's created this technique, and you're starting to have, these incredibly prolific and hardworking artists and actors seeking you out, how does it how does it evolve into being what it's become today, where, you've got a worldwide kind of audience? I suppose the book's been translated into 14 different languages.
I think more than that. It's coming out in Portuguese and just came out in China and
Wow.
Chinese. And it's supposed to also come out in Polish too.
Wow.
So lots of. But here's the thing about it. You say, how does it find its way? And one of the kind of concepts of your show is creating your own vision and how it finds its way to actually be successful. Is that I don't think in terms of success. I think in terms of I just want to be the best at what I do, and then things happen. And it's not, and to me it's like, oh my, I'm here at this place where I have a big house, I have really cool cars, and I don't have to balance my checkbook anymore. But I didn't. It came accidentally. It occurred to me when someone mentioned something. I was like, oh yeah, I do have that kind of success. But I don't think in terms of. I think the best way to be successful is to love what you do in measurable amounts, and just pursue it fearlessly pursue it, and it will be gravy. The perk is success. And the thing is, it's almost inevitable that will happen. If you're looking to be successful and make money, you inevitably probably won't. So it has to come from the love of what you do, work ethic, really putting yourself out there, taking risks, and making bold choices, and the risk taking that you do. And things just come and they happen.
Well, thank you so much, Ivana. I'm a little bit stunned that this is your first podcast, and I think that someone with the career
you broke the mold, so I'm never going to do another one now.
That's true.
So you just did such a good job.
Well, thank you.
No, thank you.
I'm honoured to be your first to be your first podcast.
Pop my cherry.
Pop the podcast cherry.
Pop the podcast cherry. It's hard to say it. Say it 3 times.
Pop the podcast cherry. Pop the podcast. No, couldn't do
it.
I end all of my conversations with the same question. Question is, what makes you silly?
I think you've been watching me be silly through this whole thing. What makes me silly? I think I like to have fun. I think people take life too seriously, and if there's a way, the darkest of circumstances, to find silliness in it, then do it. I actually talked about this in class on Thursday. I said, you got to find, I call it a dork quotient. Find your silly factor. Find the dork inside of you and bring that out. No matter how dark it is, we want to have fun. Bottom line, don't do it if you're not having fun. Don't do it if you're not going to have the audience having some kind of fun in your journey. And silly helps us, like, it's like if you can't see the dark,